nobody watches a film, I hope, thinking, oh, that's an objective shot, so it means this, or that's a subjective shot, so that means that. The same way that you don't read a book and think, great use of adverbs. It's just part of the experience. So
Unfortunately, I think there are quite a few people that do that.
Do you know who you're talking to, Ben?
Jen Pop doesn't read books that way.
Welcome back, everybody, to a Two to Reel not movie review. Today, this is our first ever interview with a director, and a director of a film that Rich and I loved and reviewed on the channel called Good Boy. Came out this year in 2025. We are honored to have Ben Leonberg, who directed the film and whose dog Indy is the best actor of all time. Even though the dog's not acting, he will tell you. But Ben, welcome to the channel, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Heck yeah. Now, this is so cool for us because first, you could see behind us, we mentioned before filming with you, we have a lot of books back there. But now, Rich, are you excited to get into the movie space? Like, ooh. It's like,
I am.
oh, yeah.
No, and I'm also happy to start with this one. Especially, there's a lot of movies out there that will be fairly straightforward in the sense of, hey, you're watching some action plot. I haven't, stuff you've seen before, personally. The reason why I'm really excited to have you on, Ben, is this movie is a little different in how it was filmed, especially with how long it took, the fact that your main star is the cutest boy ever. There's a lot of technical challenges that I really would love to talk to you about.
Yeah, for sure. And they're technical challenges that actually kind of come down to a literary device expressed cinematically. I mean, not to get too far ahead, but the reason we made all the practical decisions we did is because I was kind of obsessed with the idea that our only point of view character would be the dog. And took that as far as we could. There's a lot of technical challenges on how do you get a camera on a dog's level and tell a story from that unique perspective, but it came from that, kind of core creative DNA that we were always trying to steer around.
And did the idea for the film come from you were watching Poltergeist for, like you said, 100 times, and then you were seeing that the dog in that film recognized the horror going on before the humans did, and you're seeing, oh, what if I just made a whole film where the dog's the protagonist in a horror film?
100%. I mean, so I diary and keep journals of all my writing ideas that I'm working on, and I can trace it back to 2012, so over 10 years ago.
Wow.
I had watched Poltergeist probably for the millionth time. It's one of my favorite horror movies. And I wrote down horror movie, but from dog's point of view, ? And then just kept noodling on it, kept trying to look for, have people done things similar to this? Obviously that trope of the dog who knows better, it exists kind of across genres, but especially in horror and thriller. The idea that there's a dog with a family who's moved into a house that it was just, the deal was too good to be true, but that's weird. The dog won't go into the basement. Or the dog who's always barking at that creepy neighbor who's in his backyard late at night. We've seen that kind of a character, if you want to call it that, in all kinds of fiction. And I just wanted to take that story as far as we could because dogs are such amazing, sympathetic and empathetic characters.
I will, for the audience, Rich, we should say we're not going to spoil the film till the end. So
I was just about to say that.
Go ahead. Give that
it'll
warning.
It'll be spoiler-free for this movie until a certain point. We'll give a warning.
Sure. We can chat about it, yeah.
By the way, if you do want to check out Good Boy, check it out on streaming and also keep an eye out for it on Blu-ray DVD.
It's currently on Shudder. We'll have that all linked in the description below. But we're not going to spoil yet, but we will talk around the film. And
there's mainly a central spoiler that we will avoid
until later. Yes, until later. That's a thing that, us hearing about Good Boy, it's an independent film. This is indie made with a budget of, was it $70,000 was the budget for this?
I mean, the most important resource in making the film wasn't money, it was time, because the dog's performance is central, and there's really not a way you can spend money to make a dog act better. What you just need is time and patience, and fortunately, that's what we had. Indy's my own dog. We filmed it kind of like a hobby over years. My wife and I were the only people on set with him during the physical production while cameras were rolling. For almost all but a small handful of days, he's our dog, so he knows us really well, so we can find ways to film things he does naturally or set up kind of circumstances that when filmed and edited in a unique sequence of other shots just like it. It looks like there's this performance. But yes, very much an indie production, very unusual. This is not a normal way movies are made.
And Rich, that end 5 minutes that we loved in the movie, which is not spoiling the movie, but how much did we enjoy that? Getting the behind the scenes of how it was filmed.
That's not really a spoiler.
No.
If when you're watching the movie, make sure to stay to the very end. At least in the theatrical release, there is a little extended edition where you get to behind the scenes about some of the actual scenes and examples on how this film was actually made with Indy and how does Indy get all the realistic looking faces. So definitely have to check that out. Of which, speaking of those type of scenes, you talked about in that the little extra part at the end of the movie, specifically about how the audience is projecting onto Indy rather than Indy actually being scared or happy in some of these scenes.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what was the easiest scene that just where it was you filmed it was we saw exactly what was happening of it was pretty clear cut versus what was probably the trickiest where it was almost the hardest thing to get the audience to project onto.
So hardest to get the audience project onto. The first thing that comes to mind when you ask what was the hardest thing, it's so the easiest things were anytime Indy needed to move around because he's a dog. He's always reacting to stimuli, following his nose, his ears. So easy things would be anytime he has to move and realistically follow his nose like he's following a supernatural force. So there's scenes in the film where we see him literally nose to the ground, hunting down this thing that is haunting the house. To film that, we would just take his food and make a breadcrumb trail for him to follow. And that's the easiest and most repeatable thing in the world. He loves to do that. If you've ever had a dog that's very driven by food, you can imagine how just like, yep, that'll work. And you can just kind of keep doing that forever. Stillness, on the other hand, was incredibly challenging. At the end of the film, and I don't want to give away too much, but there's a very emotional finale. And there's some dramatic close-ups of Indy where I just needed him to hold still and kind of maintain this very specific shot with a shallow depth of field where he couldn't move a whole lot, or he would go out of frame or go out of focus. And it took days to get him to hold still. Not days of filming, but it was like, we've got a 3-hour window each day in which he can work. And on a Monday, we tried once, tried again on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday, we had our 8 seconds we ended up using in the film.
Holding still for 8 seconds.
Yes. And it's the kind of thing, too, that if you're working with a human actor, this would take no time at all. Just you would tell someone, hey, hold still. But there's no way to tell that to a dog and have them understand that, at least not in my experience.
And that's why, is that part of the reason it took the over 400 days or 3-ish years, that number that's been, is that what it was? Was it over 3 years?
Yeah, so we don't, I actually don't know the exact number. I know it's over 400 days. I think it's somewhere around 412. And the reason I don't know is that after that long a duration, my log and note taking kind of broke down a little bit.
Yeah.
And you kind of lose track. And it was I would say Indy being an X factor was the reason it took as long as it did. The most important resource in addition to time really is his attention span. And as long as his attention span is how much we can film in any given day. So it's not like we were filming 12 hours a day. We would film for like an hour or two, maybe 3, if it was a really good day and we weren't asking a whole lot of Indy. Once his attention span is shot and used up, there's not really anything you can do to bring it back. So that's why it would be like, if we couldn't get shot A on Monday, try again on Tuesday, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
And also, he would just frequently not do what I thought he was going to do. Sometimes the thing I didn't think that I wasn't expecting would be better than planned, but more often than not, it was a challenge, and I had to find a way to work around whatever Indy wanted to do on that given day. And sometimes manage to salvage a shot, and then other times just have to come back the next day and try again.
Speaking of, is there any particular shot in the movie that came about not because of your planning, but because of an unexpected thing that Indy did that you just felt, oh, this would work?
I don't know if I can think of a specific shot, but I can think of little gestures and things that he did that I never could have planned, that as soon as he did them, I was like, oh, well, we have to embrace this. At the end of the movie, and again, I'll speak generally to not give anything away, But there's a moment where he's just kind of gone through this big trial and battle and is preparing to like make a final heroic push to save the day. And before he does, he shakes his like ears and fur all out and like shakes all the water off him. He's wet and muddy. And it just kind of has the same physicality of like, you know, Rocky's about to go into the final round and like is getting ready. And it just like, I could never have planned that. I don't know why it reads that way, but I was just, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, well, this is the take. It has to be. I could never train my dog to, hey, shake right now.
Right.
Maybe some people can, but I can't. Little gestures like that. Sometimes he would, you know, suddenly decide while cameras are rolling that he needed to sniff the air because maybe there was, I don't know, a bird outside or a plane overhead. And those little gestures, if you edit them just so, it looks like he's picking up on the supernatural, or you can use it as a little nuance to his character, which would be hard to accomplish if you didn't film for as long as we did.
I'm sure you're not surprised that everybody, when they were being pitched this movie, they saw the trailer and they were saying, hey, should I watch this? Does the dog die? Is one of the big questions everybody asks. And everybody, you hadn't asked me at an AMA on Reddit that I was reading through as well, where some of the questions were geared more toward like how'd you treat Indy? Like how like did you actually scare him during the set? And there were these behind the scenes questions. And do you want to clarify for our viewers who didn't check your AMA, just be like, hey, Indy was treated like a good boy.
Oh,
he was
yeah,
great.
for sure. I mean, Indy is my pet. He's my
Yep.
dog. Making the film was playing with him. It's a game. He's very intelligent, and like a lot of smart dogs, he likes to problem solve. So many of the times when you see this look of like vexed worry on Indy's face, what's actually happening is behind the camera, I have him set just so the camera's in between the two of us, pointed at Indy, and I'm behind the camera making bird noises at him. Or I'm saying something in a tone of voice that sounds like a command. I don't know if you guys have dogs, but like if you say sit to a dog or stay, there's like a very natural cadence you would say that. But if you switch the word out for pizza box boy, and that doesn't mean anything, but he's like, what does pizza box mean? And it produces this really interesting performance. So the whole thing is just him playing a game with me. And then the emotion that people are feeling, especially the sense of fear, doesn't come from Indy. It comes from the audience. You suggested this before, or alluded to this before in the behind the scenes featurette. I explained this much more in depth using the Kuleshov effect. Not to get on a film professor soapbox, but essentially what it is that meaning can be conveyed through cinema through juxtaposition. Just shot A plus shot B will create a feeling. The classic example is if you take a actor's face and film a close-up and the actor is projecting nothing, but then show a point of view shot, it will make people think the actor is performing. So if you show a shot of a guy with a neutral face and then a bowl of food, you think that guy must be hungry. But if you show the same shot of the guy with a neutral face and then show a coffin, people think that guy must be sad. So too, Indy frequently is just looking slightly intently off camera, and then his point of view shot is of a scary corner and a shadow moves across the wall and there's a bit of tense music, and the movie is telling you that you are afraid and that this is scary, and then we project that back onto Indy. It's again, very cinematic way you can kind of create meaning and create emotion on the big screen.
I loved learning that and getting that snippet of the behind the scenes in the film, and learning that you're a film professor. Is there also another thing you would teach your students that you applied in the film? Obviously the am I saying this right? Kuleshov, that effect.
Yes. Yeah.
That being the main one. Was there another trick and technique you use in the filmmaking that you're going to teach your students or use in classes?
I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the Kuleshov effect, but I would say how much just perspective can tell a story. The difference between, there's generally speaking two kinds of shots in a movie, objective and subjective shots. Subjective meaning that they are from a character's point of view or they allude to a character's point of view. And then objective meaning it's not assigned to a character in the film. It's just something the audience is seeing. Just by combining very thoughtfully the use of objective and subjective shots, you can create meaning that wouldn't otherwise be there. A simple way in a horror movie is just, let's say we've just been in the subjectivity of a character for a really long time, maybe as they explore deeper and deeper into a creepy house. But then we get an objective shot of the character's back turn and a door opens behind them. The audience then knows something the character doesn't know and knows to be on edge leading up to some sort of punchline, jump scare, whatever it might be. That was kind of a vague example, but I do things like that throughout the film. Just nobody, and I should say, nobody watches a film, I hope, thinking, oh, that's an objective shot, so it means this, or that's a subjective shot, so that means that. The same way that you don't read a book and think, great use of adverbs. It's just part of the experience. So
unfortunately, I think there are quite a few people that do that. I
Do you know who you're talking to, Ben?
Gen Pop doesn't read books that way.
Well, with books, I don't know if this is an exact one-to-one, but is it kind of like a first-person versus a third-person omniscient point of view? A bit of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I can't think of a ton of books where you would jump in and out of like third-person omniscient and first-person point of view. I guess I can actually. Don't they do that in... actually, this is up your alley. Is it Fifth Season?
We have not read Fifth Season.
Oh,
but
okay.
No.
All right, they kind of do that.
But you know a book that does is the shape. No, Spear Cuts Through Water is a fantasy book that's been getting very popular, which is on our TBR. But we hear that it uses first, second, and third person throughout the book, which is why we're excited to read it. Because you're right, it's very rare. You don't see that often.
Totally. Yeah.
Also, Ken Liu's book.
Grace of Kings.
Grace of Kings.
Yeah.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Yep.
Yeah, that uses that exact. Most of the story is your subjective POV, and occasionally you do get the more objective point of view that gives the audience
Conversation with gods and stuff.
yes,
Right.
and
Totally.
more
Yeah.
details.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's kind of what's unique about film. I mean, there's a lot of things that are between how a story works in film versus on the page. But in a film, in a sequence, in a scene even, you can cut between objective and subjective storytelling on the kind of on the turn of a dime, and that's not going to bump anybody. I would guess in those books that you referenced, and certainly this is the case in Fifth Season, we cut from those different perspectives in chapters. The same way that like in Game of Thrones, we're now in Tyrion, and now we're in Cersei. Like, the chapters are the point of view characters, typically.
Yeah.
Anyway, fun tangent.
Well, we're talking about the differences between the films and just kind of these restrictions. Something that impressed me a lot with Good Boy, or at least it gave me further evidence of a personal thought on movie making. I think restrictions and boundaries make better art. And to some...
Could not agree more.
The fact that Good Boy, you were restricted by, hey, it's your dog. You can't actually get him to act. You have to pull everything that you can through different tricks and different avenues. And all of these restrictions, I think, made it a better film. Would you agree? It sounds like you do. Second, in which case does this not apply? What do you think was actually hindered in the film because of the restrictions that you just had because of the nature of the film?
Well, the way I always thought of it wasn't that the restrictions are necessarily going to make it good, but I certainly did know when I was making the film that they would make it unique, in the sense that, really going all in on the point of view character of the dog. He's driving the movie. Every shot is either going to be of him or from his perspective. There's a real challenge in just how do you unfold a narrative. We wanted this to be very familiar to the way a lot of haunted house films begin. And the more I read classic haunted house stories and watched classic haunted house books, you realize this is not that profound of an observation, but dialogue is really important. The dog can't do that. He also can't do the thing that seems to happen in all of these books where characters find a library and take a big book off the shelf and they're like, back in the 1800s, they burned witches here. He can't read books. He can't have conversations. He can't even open doors if a door closes on him. That's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity because then there's a new puzzle box to kind of work your way out of. So I think the things that where it maybe isn't true, that what the good and the bad maybe of the limitation is, I certainly wouldn't blame anybody who watches this movie and can't hang with the, like, it's too much of no dialogue. There are huge sections of this film where there's people talking, but like it's deep in the background. There's a few times in the movie where I'm very entertained and tickled by this, where there's an important human conversation going on, and Indy will wander away from it and literally leave, like it fades into the background so the audience can't hear it. I would not fault people for being like, for stumbling on that. Again, it's unique, but that's, I think also what makes it good, if not challenging.
You had a couple short films before this, and then this was the first feature length, and it comes out 75, 76-ish minutes. How did doing those short films beforehand prep you for making this full narrative? Were there challenges? Man, the runtime, making a full film has its challenges on its own, but what was the big difference there?
I think I'm going to steal this quote from a teacher of mine, but I think one of the biggest challenges at a high level is that when you're making a short film, you can hold the whole thing in your head. You can pre-visualize in your imagination a full short film, say under 20 minutes or so, and you can totally see how you want this to go. For my experience, and I think for most people, maybe with the exception of a few geniuses, it's very difficult to hold a full feature in your mind, which is why you write it down all these different ways. Like you write the film, then you storyboard it, and you line a script, and you create floor plans and shot lists to map the film out, with all these architectural blueprints, essentially. But I hope that wasn't too conceptual of an answer, but that's definitely one of the challenges that I found very much to be true.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, cool. I bet the same is with a very short novella versus an epic fantasy novel. The larger the novel, the shorter a short story basically would totally, probably function the same.
And I think very much short films work the same way for the people who are creating them that are honing their art. Short films, there's not much of a market for them, but they're how you learn the craft. The same way that a lot of people learn novel writing by writing lots of short stories or poems or novellas, or microfiction, to kind of figure out how stories work before taking that and applying it to a grander scale.
And I want to make clear for the audience, we're not the only ones that love this film. Recently, NBR just listed it as a top 10 independent film of the year, which is the National Board Review. And it also the Spirit Awards. There was another one that just came out recently. So a lot of people are praising Good Boy. We highly recommend, as we've been talking about so far already. But also, Ben, I'm sure you've seen this too, but did you see the petition online that you did? Yeah, 45,000 signatures to make sure that Indy gets an honorary Oscars. And you have 2 new signers as well. So,
amazing! Well, thank you.
Did you? I'm sure you heard about this. Were you surprised this became a thing?
And to be very clear, Indy has not been invited yet, but he will attend if asked.
He better.
Well, that's what the Academy is for. However, with all the success that Good Boy has been receiving and all the praise, what reward have you given the star of the show? What did you do anything special for Indy as a big celebration?
I mean, he's very easy to please. So one of the things we didn't do when we were making the film, we lived in that house you see in the movie, and partly so we could live there and work. Is we never played fetch inside the house. That would just be a very different spirit of an energy he would bring. He would look very, very excited to be there. And for the years we were making the movie, we would actually go somewhere else to play fetch with him and do these big, retrieve sessions. He has had a huge increase of both hide and go seek and fetch in the house, and huge celebratory dinners that coincide with some of the red carpets he's attended. When he goes on a red carpet, he has no idea. He doesn't know he's been in a movie. He doesn't know he's on a red carpet. So he always gets a special meal and extra treats on those days to know he's done a very good job.
Sounds awesome.
I'm very happy that the Good Boy is getting some good treats.
Heck yes.
Yes. Yeah. He's not hard to please. Any food is the best food in the world, according to him.
How daunting is it? Now, I imagine you're going to make more movies after a Good Boy that you now have to work with. I'm assuming you're going to work with humans in the future.
For sure. Yeah. So... I am committed that my second film will star humans who can read a script and know that they are in a movie.
I will be so curious to ask you one day, what was the advantage of human versus dog and disadvantage of human versus dog? I'm sure you can guess already at what that will be.
Yeah. I mean, I can say this, having made this movie with a dog who doesn't know he's in a movie, and his performance is purely coming from this kind of audience projection in the Kuleshov effect, it's made me more excited to work with actors, and I think I appreciate a part of acting that I wasn't. It's probably not front of mind when I've thought about who some of my favorite actors are. Um, that so much of being an actor isn't just projecting, but it's also being a canvas. You can think of like Ryan Gosling in Drive, who's doing very little, but feels like the smartest guy in the room and is super still feels emotive. So much of that is just from audience, projection. That there's a whole lot of actors that are famous for not doing a lot, but still conveying a huge amount. And I feel like I know more about how those dials work now. And I will definitely bring that into future films.
Sweet. Anything? Did you want to ask something before spoilers? Because I have one last question. Otherwise, did you?
Oh, before spoilers.
Yeah, before we give a warning to people.
Oh, what? Now I want to talk about the ending.
I just have one more question for you then. Of any project that you're currently thinking about working on, do you know when you would want to start your next film? Anything that is currently
and
in your head?
It labeled Bad Cat?
Oh, yes.
No,
it has to be.
As I
The
said,
sequel.
no animals in the next film, but it is another perspective-driven film. So the same person I wrote Good Boy with, Alex Cannon, we have a few projects together that we've been noodling on for a while. Thankfully, not thankfully, having to work on a movie for as long as Good Boy meant that we were able to get all of our future scripts kind of very lined up and buttoned up. So we've got movie number 2 underway. Perspective driven in the way that Good Boy is, but not from an animal's point of view. I guess I can say that.
Awesome. Now this is everybody's chance. Go watch Good Boy. Go watch it on Shudder. It'll be released in physical soon-ish. We'll have that all in the description / comments below as well as soon as we get the update on links. But go check it out. Good Boy. It's out right now. And with that, spoiler warning, so we can just talk about the whole film if you want to be wary of that. Or you could just still stay and get spoiled from the film. That's okay too. So, yeah. Wow. We love the film so much. And
I'll start off with, if you haven't seen our review of it, like at least my overall thoughts is roughly shared is I'm not much of a horror guy in general.
Same, yeah.
However, the unique perspective of, hey, it's dog in a horror movie. I liked the film quite a lot throughout the movie. I liked the shots. All this was great. What made it special to me was the ending of how much this movie had to say about, it was very much a personal story about a dog going through loss. And the fact that, well, your character really is not becoming a monster, but changing due to cancer. And because of that, because of his grief, anger, treating Indy in a worse and worse way, and maybe trying to distance himself from his own dog. That hurt.
Oh, it was beautiful.
That was
beautiful.
It was a beautiful ending, and that made it all very special to me. And so, was that mostly intended from the beginning of that this would be more of a personal story about a dog getting over loss?
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to say when from the beginning. I mean, as we started writing the film, we knew it would be a ghost story, a haunted house film told from the perspective of the dog. And as we were figuring out what was going on, I really have to credit my co-writer for the epiphany of, I mean, a character says this line essentially in the film, but what would be the difference from a dog's point of view of a supernatural malevolent force or an invisible presence it can detect, like a cancer or a terminal disease, this invisible necrotic force? For a dog, those are maybe one and the two of the same things. And we really kind of just took that idea. Some people still read the film very much that like there is nothing supernatural happening. It is purely like a medical problem that the dog is detecting. And you're exactly right to pinpoint that as the man is deteriorating, his relationship with Indy changes quite a bit. My favorite interpretation of the ending, which I agree with, is that when he chains Indy up outside for the finale, he's doing so because he doesn't want his own dog to watch him die. And Indy's a simple character, which I think is not a problem. I think simplicity is good. From his point of view, for the dog, we always love to say that this is a horror movie, but from Indy's point of view, it's a love story. He just wants to be with Todd and be near him. So the worst thing that can happen, which is usually what the worst thing that can possibly happen at the end of the second act, take you into the third, is Indy is chained up outside, away from the person he loves, and he has to fight to get back inside and hopefully save him.
And I love that he also does choose. He stays by his owner's side, but does ultimately leave when the
Sister.
Yeah, the sister comes,
Mhm.
and he does leave. It leaves that. It leaves you thinking even more of like you could have ended it differently, and I think it
Yes.
would have.
How many different stories have shown of like, you know, the loyal dog? I think almost everyone knows about, at least in pop culture, the idea of Fry's dog from Futurama.
Of course,
and the
yeah.
tearjerker of like it stayed,
By the
so
grave.
his owner says stay, and the dog died.
Yeah, staying
being
there just
loyal.
forever. Yeah.
Mhm.
And how many different stories have we seen that of the dog has to die because of its loyalty to its owner? And
Right.
this one going that Indy is not being disloyal to Todd by moving on. It's what Todd would have wanted, and it's inevitable. He must find something
Yes,
else.
yeah. Life goes on. There has to be something that comes next.
Mhm.
So I'm also, this is just the basics of like, the fundamentals of drama.
Yeah.
But frequently, if a character at the start of a story believes one thing, by the end of the film, they need to come to believe that that thing they really truly thought was true is not true, and they have to like come to do the opposite. So I mentioned that Indy's character is very simple. He just loves Todd. He just wants to be with him. That's it. So the hardest thing he would have to do would be to leave him and go on and live his life without him. And that's the end of the movie. It's essentially when the sister comes, there's just a visualized choice. He's in the middle of a frame looking up into light where he can go off with his sister or stay down in the darkness with the memory of Todd forever. And as soon as he goes up into the light, the movie's over. And that's the end. Of course, there's a little bit in the credits where we see him, literally leaving with the sister. But it's exactly as you say.
Now, I did have a question on mainly that ending scene with, as we start get to the ending, the supernatural part of it starts to become a little bit more exaggerated, of like trying to blend. Before, there's a lot of confusion of, oh, is it a real ghost? Is it not? And by the end, we're in this, spooky basement, the dark hole, and Todd is talking to Indy of like you have to move on, boy. And how much of that conversation actually happened with how much of this is Indy thinking about this, and how much of that speech that Todd gives him actually what Todd said to his dog?
Do you mean in the filming of the movie? Like, what did I say to my dog to get the performance? So much sillier in the filming.
I mean, both questions are interesting, but as far as the filmmaking goes, in the beginning of the film, I see it far more as objective stance of this is stuff that is actually happening, and then as the monsters start being visual, how much of that is just inside Indy's mind rather than what is actually happening. So the final conversation with Todd, was that real, or is that more of the movie magic? So
I guess what I would say is we've seen there's also a version of Todd at the end of the movie that is still dead in the bed. I've always thought of it that's like Todd's spirit almost, that like Indy is willing to drag out of the afterlife to try and keep with him. So it's maybe, I don't know if real or imaginary is like, I feel at that point in the story, we're almost in the realm of a little bit of like the metaphysical, that it's maybe his spirit or his ghost or his essence that is like left and then has become the thing that's been pursuing him the whole time, this goo covered dark shape, which of course is the metaphor you've already correctly identified.
It seems to be. So me being not super well watched in the horror genre, and it's not my go-to genre when I watch films, but the two things that usually stick out to me when I think horror is, one, that aspect of a lot of horror films will blend between the real and the surreal, and what is real. a lot of I kind of like body horror, honestly. The Substance
Sure.
and Black Swan, those are some I love those because it gets very, very like, oh, what is actually happening to our character. So that's one. The second thing, which we were already touching up on, is the horror usually represents something of like it represents a fear, and in this case, it's representing this cancer, and it's how does Indy react to this? Is that something you being a horror fan as well also attribute to those? Are those two staples in horror to you that you were either purposefully or unintentionally like were emulating that you think are those cruxes of the horror genre? Is that what
Yeah,
you
for
think?
sure. I think maybe the way I'd put it is that I think some of the horror I like the most exists in an ambiguity. So
Mm,
maybe let's use The Shining as an example. If you know either the
mhm.
movie or the book, I think both are maybe the movie more than the book actually represents this idea better. But that there's one way to look at that story where there's a supernatural hotel that is possessing a father to murder his family, or there's an alcoholic dad who's losing his mind due to fever, and it's more of a thriller, and it's not supernatural, and he is going mad. And I think that ambiguity between those two possibilities,
Love it.
neither being right or wrong,
Mhm.
but both maybe being true, I think that makes things a lot scarier, just because the ambiguity of not quite being able to pin down the exact nature of the evil or the Dionysian force in the story makes things, I think, scarier. Um, and certainly the idea that like the horror is a metaphor for something else, I think that that's absolutely true and applicable. I think the thing that I was very much focused on with Good Boy, and even this down to the scene construction of how I film things with Indy, was I really think horror needs to be relatable. There has to be some core that feels like this is real. I recognize either this place or these behaviors or those characters in my real life. And I think this is true even things that are really outlandish, like Alien. None of us have been on the Nostromo, but those guys, like that crew, like those just feel like I don't know, like our uncles or something. Like you know what I mean? Like those guys feel really real.
Mm.
And the way they talk and the way they eat, like that seems like a conversation we've been in. The version of that I was trying to apply with Good Boy is that I think every dog owner or someone who's been around a dog for a period of time wonders or worries, why is my dog barking in the middle of the night? Why is he staring at nothing?
Mhm.
So I think those tiny relatable kernels that kind of inform scenes and kind of that was hugely inspirational for the whole script can really make things work really hard.
Well,
Right. That's
it's
all.
the same way of if the audience is projecting onto the movie,
Mhm.
in many ways the good horror movie projects onto your own personal life of I'm
Absolutely.
this is relatable to something that just happened to me, and now I've made a more mundane situation scarier or
Totally.
amplified my own fear.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like it can apply to the kinds of characters, the kinds of actors, the way things look. I mean, think of like woods in movies. You know, like the woods in the film E.T. are those are like redwood forests, which are not where most people live, and it looks wonderful and magical. It looks like the way the woods feel when you're a kid. Then look at the woods in like the Blair Witch Project. Those feel like the woods behind your house. Like I just grew up in the suburbs in New Jersey. The woods behind all of my friends' houses looked like those woods. And there's something, they don't look grand or magical. They look mundane, but also scary because I've been to places like that before. It's
Mhm.
little choices, visualized in that way that I think really can make horror, you know, the most effective. Did that
Do you
make
th-
sense?
yeah, that makes
Well,
perfect sense.
the
Yeah,
thing
go
that
ahead.
makes this interesting is if it is about relating to the mundane nature of like, things that the audience can relate with. I imagine that that is one of the particular challenges of maybe people own dogs and people have pets, but
Mhm.
they are not a dog. How could an audience ever identify with the feeling of a dog losing its like no
Well,
one's gone through that. And
totally.
I mean that's I guess that is the point of the movie is to get that perspective in a way.
Indeed, but at the same token, humans think in animals. I forget where I've heard this quote from, but like the first art any person ever made was painting like a bear or a horse on a cave wall. And we use animals to make sense of our own feelings and emotions and stories we tell about ourselves. People describe themselves as mama bears, like it's very human to think of ourselves and classify our emotions as animals. And I think part of the reason some of the response to the trailer of Good Boy was like so much like, oh God, if the dog dies, we riot, is that people feel very intensely for animals. So you're totally right. It's not so much that I think we put ourselves in the animal's shoes, but we feel for them and about them so intensely that as a storyteller, it's almost like a cheat code. Just like, I did not have access to mega famous actors, but I did have access to my dog. Everybody loves dogs. And it's just kind of an easy way to get the audience on your side, or at least on the side of your main character. So both things are true.
Yeah, it's that kind of innate feeling of how can a dog, if a dog ever does something evil, well, it's the owner's fault, because you can never really blame the dog. It's well, they had a horrible owner. Look at what that dog did. So you can never really put blame on these. The animals are always very innocent in this way, and that I didn't think of how
only certain animals. I think you can. There's plenty of media that have cats as actually evil.
Yeah,
they're just
snakes in general, but
snakes also can be evil. But yeah, dogs. No, all dogs have to be either good or
bad
twisted
owner.
By
the owner,
by some other human force. For sure.
Exactly. Do you think that are you going to stay in the horror genre for a while, or do you think you're going to go into a different genre for your next film?
For my next film, I'm going to be staying in horror. It's the genre that I consume the most in terms of horror books, films, short films. It's the thing I probably think about the most. Who knows why we love the things we do.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I will make more horror films. But outside of that, I'm sure I also love genre. I love science fiction. I love adventure. The dog is named Indy for the archaeologist. It's probably not surprising what my favorite movie is. So I think genre overall is something I will stick with.
Sweet. Hey, I can't wait.
Do you think Indy will make a cameo in your next film?
I think cameo, yeah. I think that's the right level for what he can, what we can work into a normal, human film schedule. Cameo is the right place.
The Good Boy-verse. You just create like a multiverse of.
I'm waiting for the Indyverse.
the Indyverse.
Every film, Indy's somewhere there.
Oh,
I'd be lying if I was saying my co-writer and I had not mapped out several Indy-centric films. But like I said, I got to make a movie with humans before I make another dog movie.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming on and chatting Good Boy, the movie, and everything with us. We loved it. We hope people go ahead and give it a watch. We'll be watching your next film. And again, everybody, link in the descriptions below for watching Good Boy on Shudder and release on Blu-ray as well, coming out soon.
Buy physical media.
Physical's great.
They can't take physical media from you.
It's yours.
Yep.
Now, Ben, anything you wanted to part with?
I don't think so. No, I guess, like I said, check the film out, streaming on a local TV near you, physical media. You can follow us at goodboy.film on Instagram just to find out what's going on with any other red carpets or galas that Indy will be attending in award season for whatever comes to pass there. But thank you for having me. This has been a really fun conversation.
No problem. Yeah, we enjoyed it so much. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We'll see everyone in the next one.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.